the critical mistakes that could ruin your entire garden. Most gardeners don't realize they're sabotaging their own harvest until it's too late. One wrong pairing of plants can cost you months of hard work. I'm Adam Groves, and here at Backyard Crops, we help you grow smarter, not harder. If you're serious about getting the best results from your garden this season, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you'll want these tips all year long. Let me share something that changed everything for me. Years back, I planted what I thought was the perfect garden layout. Everything looked great on paper. But when harvest time came, disaster. My tomatoes were stunted, my beans barely produced, and I couldn't figure out what went wrong. Then I learned about companion planting, or more importantly, what not to plant together. That knowledge transformed my garden completely. And by the end of this guide, you'll know exactly which vegetables to keep separated and why it matters so much. Before we jump into the specific pairings to avoid, smash that like button if you're ready to level up your gardening game. And drop a comment below telling me what vegetables you're growing this season. I read every single one, and I love hearing from fellow gardeners. Why plant placement actually matters. See, plants aren't just sitting there looking pretty. Underground, there's an entire world of activity happening. Roots are spreading, nutrients are being absorbed, and plants are releasing various compounds into the soil around them. Some plants work beautifully together, boosting each other's growth and keeping pests away. But others, they're like roommates who can't stand each other. They compete for the same nutrients, spread diseases to one another, or release chemicals that slow down their neighbor's growth. Understanding these relationships is the difference between a mediocre garden and an incredible one. So let's talk about the 7 most important vegetable combinations you need to avoid.
Why plant placement actually matters. See, plants aren't just sitting there looking pretty. Underground, there's an entire world of activity happening. Roots are spreading, nutrients are being absorbed, and plants are releasing various compounds into the soil around them. Some plants work beautifully together, boosting each other's growth and keeping pests away. But others? They're like roommates who can't stand each other. They compete for the same nutrients, spread diseases to one another, or release chemicals that slow down their neighbor's growth. Understanding these relationships is the difference between a mediocre garden and an incredible one. So let's talk about the 7 most important vegetable combinations you need to avoid.
Combination 1. Tomatoes and potatoes should never be neighbors. This is probably the most critical pairing to avoid, and there's solid science behind it. Both tomatoes and potatoes belong to the nightshade family, which means they're susceptible to the same diseases. Here's where timing makes everything worse. Potatoes go into the ground early in spring, right? They're just sitting there, growing underground, getting exposed to whatever diseases are lurking in the soil. By early summer, when disease pressure peaks for potatoes, your tomato plants are just getting established. If you plant these 2 crops next to each other, the diseases that build up in your potato patch can easily jump over to your young tomato plants. And when tomatoes get infected early in their growth cycle, there's no recovering. It's too late in the season to start over, so you're basically stuck with diseased plants that won't produce much. Late blight is the biggest concern here. This devastating disease can wipe out both crops in a matter of days under the right conditions. Why risk your entire harvest when you can simply plant these crops in different areas of your garden? If you're enjoying these tips, do me a favor and share this video with a friend who gardens. Let's help more people grow better food together. Combination 2. Garlic, onions, and legumes don't mix. Beans and peas are amazing crops. They actually pull nitrogen from the air and store it in their roots, enriching your soil naturally. But here's the problem. When you plant garlic or onions nearby, you're setting your legumes up for failure. Alliums like garlic and onions have a secret weapon. They release sulfur compounds into the surrounding soil. These compounds help protect the alliums from certain pests and diseases, which is great for them. But for legumes, it's terrible news. Those sulfur compounds interfere with the legume's ability to develop properly. Your bean and pea plants will germinate just fine, but they won't grow as tall or produce as many pods as they should. You'll end up with stunted plants that produce maybe half of what they could have given you. Think about it. You're spending the same amount of time watering, weeding, and caring for these plants regardless. Why settle for half the harvest when you can get the full potential just by changing where you plant them? Space your alliums and legumes at least a few feet apart. Or, better yet, put them in completely different beds. Your bean harvest will thank you. Combination 3. Garlic and onions compete for everything. You might think that since garlic and onions are in the same family, they'd make great companions. But the opposite is true, and the reason comes down to pure competition. Both of these crops are what we call heavy nitrogen feeders. They pull massive amounts of nitrogen from the soil to develop their bulbs. When you plant them side by side, they're both reaching for the same nutrients at the same time. What happens? They end up competing fiercely with each other. The soil gets depleted quickly, and neither plant gets enough of what it needs. You'll harvest smaller bulbs with less flavor, and your storage life will be shorter too. Now, you can work around this if you're committed. You'd need to fertilize heavily and regularly throughout the growing season to keep the nitrogen levels up. But honestly, that's a lot of extra work and expense when you could just plant them in different locations and let each crop thrive on its own. At Backyard Crops, we're all about working smarter. Why make more work for yourself when simple planning solves the problem? Combination 4. Broccoli and tomatoes are a bad match. This pairing surprises a lot of gardeners because the timing seems perfect. Broccoli is a cool season crop that matures in late spring. Tomatoes are warm season plants that go in around the same time. So why not plant them together? The issue comes from those same sulfur compounds we talked about earlier. Broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables like cabbage and cauliflower release sulfur as they grow and decompose. This is particularly problematic when your broccoli plants finish their cycle and start breaking down in the soil. Tomatoes are sensitive to accumulated sulfur in the soil. When sulfur levels get too high, tomato plants struggle to grow properly. You'll notice stunted growth, yellowing leaves, and reduced fruit production. The smart move? Harvest your broccoli completely. Clear out all the plant material and wait a couple of weeks before planting tomatoes in that spot. Or, better yet, use a crop rotation system where tomatoes follow a different crop entirely. Planning ahead saves you frustration later. And speaking of planning, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. We share growing tips, harvest techniques, and problem-solving advice all season long. Combination 5. Oregano and squash have opposite needs. This combination fails for a completely different reason. These plants want totally opposite growing conditions. Oregano is a Mediterranean herb. It's a perennial that comes back year after year, and once established, it actually prefers dry conditions. Too much water can cause root rot and kill your oregano plants. They thrive on neglect, basically. Squash plants are the exact opposite. They're annuals with massive leaves that transpire huge amounts of water every day. In hot weather, squash plants can look wilted by afternoon even if you watered that morning. They need consistent moisture to produce all those delicious squash and zucchini. When you plant these together, you're stuck in an impossible situation. If you water enough for the squash, you'll drown the oregano. If you water for the oregano, your squash will suffer and produce poorly. Plus, there's the size issue. Squash plants spread out aggressively, with vines running several feet in all directions. That small oregano plant doesn't stand a chance. It'll get completely buried and shaded out. Keep your perennial herbs in a dedicated herb bed where they can get the specific care they need. Your annual vegetables should be in a separate area with their own watering schedule. Combination 6. Potatoes with cucumbers, squash, or melons. Here's another timing issue that can destroy your harvest. Potatoes go in the ground early, usually March or April, depending on your climate. By the time summer arrives and you're ready to plant cucumbers, squash, and melons, those potato plants are already mature and starting their decline. As potato plants age and begin dying back, they become magnets for fungal diseases. Alternarian leaf spot is particularly common. The fungal spores spread easily to nearby plants, especially those in the same general family. Cucumbers, squash, and melons, collectively called cucurbits, are all susceptible to many of the same fungal problems that attack potatoes. When you plant these crops next to aging potato plants, you're basically inviting disease to jump from one crop to another. Your cucurbits are just getting established, ready to grow and produce for months. But if they get infected with fungal diseases early on, their productivity plummets. You'll spend the rest of the season fighting disease instead of harvesting vegetables. The solution is simple. Plant your cucurbits far away from where your potatoes are growing. Even better, don't plant cucurbits in the same bed where you grew potatoes earlier that same season. Wait until the following year to use that space for cucurbits.
Combination 7. Fennel doesn't play well with anyone. If there's one plant that's notorious for being a bad neighbor, it's fennel. This herb might be delicious, but it's basically the garden bully. Fennel releases chemical compounds that inhibit the growth of most plants around it. Scientists call this allopathy, when plants produce biochemicals that influence the growth and survival of other plants. Tomatoes are particularly sensitive to fennel's compounds. Plant tomatoes anywhere near fennel, and you'll get stunted, unhappy plants that never reach their full size and barely produce any fruit. But it's not just tomatoes. Fennel also stunts the growth of broccoli, cabbage, and most other cruciferous vegetables. In fact, the list of plants that fennel bothers is longer than the list of plants it gets along with. My advice? Give fennel its own isolated spot in your garden, far away from everything else. Or grow it in a container where its roots can't spread and its compounds can't affect your other crops.
Creating the perfect watering system. Let's talk about keeping all these plants properly watered, because this is where a lot of gardens fail. Different crops need different amounts of water, which is another reason why companion planting matters so much. Most vegetables prefer soil that's consistently moist but never waterlogged. Think about a sponge that you've wrung out. Damp but not dripping. That's your target for soil moisture. In spring, when temperatures are mild, watery every other day usually works well. But once summer heat arrives, you might need to water twice daily, especially for thirsty crops like squash and cucumbers. The best system I've found is drip irrigation on automatic timers. You set up tubing that runs along your garden beds at soil level with small emitters that drip water directly onto the soil. The water goes right to the roots where plants need it, with minimal evaporation. Connect your drip system to a timer, and you can set it to water automatically at the best times, early morning and late evening. This consistency makes a huge difference in plant health and production. If drip irrigation isn't in your budget right now, don't worry. A good soaker hose works almost as well, and even hand watering can be fine for smaller gardens. The key is consistency. Sunlight requirements you need to know. Water isn't the only thing your vegetables need. Proper sunlight is just as critical. And different crops have different light requirements, which should factor into your planting decisions. Fruiting vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, squash, and eggplants need maximum light. Give them at least 8 hours of direct sun daily. Less than that, and you'll get plants that grow lots of leaves but don't produce much fruit. Root vegetables like carrots, beets, and potatoes also prefer full sun, around 6 to 8 hours minimum. Good light helps them develop large, flavorful roots. Leafy greens and herbs are a bit more forgiving. Lettuce, spinach, kale, and most herbs can produce decent harvests with 5 to 6 hours of sunlight. This makes them perfect for those partially shaded areas where your fruiting crops wouldn't thrive. When you're planning your garden layout, map out which areas get the most sun throughout the day. Put your highlight plants in the sunniest spots and save the partially shaded areas for greens and herbs. The right way to fertilize your garden. Even with perfect plant placement and good watering, your vegetables need proper nutrition to produce abundant harvests. Fertilizing at the right times with the right formulations makes all the difference. In early spring, when you're planting cool season crops, apply a granular fertilizer that's higher in nitrogen. Nitrogen promotes leafy growth, which is exactly what you want early in the season.
It helps plants establish quickly and build strong foliage. Come midsummer, switch to a balanced fertilizer, one where the NPK numbers are roughly equal or where phosphorus and potassium are higher. This shift encourages flowering and fruiting instead of just leaf production. You want your plants putting energy into making vegetables, not just more leaves. For perennial herbs like rosemary, sage, oregano, and thyme, fertilize lightly or not at all once they're established. These Mediterranean herbs actually produce more flavorful leaves when they're grown a bit lean. Too much fertilizer makes them grow fast but taste bland. Soil preparation and garden bed design. The foundation of any successful garden is excellent soil. Vegetables need loose, well-draining soil that's rich in organic matter. This type of soil holds moisture without getting waterlogged, and it provides the nutrients plants need to thrive. Raised beds are my top recommendation for vegetable gardening. They give you complete control over your soil mixture. They warm up faster in spring for earlier planting, and they drain better than in-ground beds. Build your raised beds at least 12 inches deep, though 18 inches is even better for crops with deep roots. Fill them with a mixture of quality topsoil, compost, and peat moss or coconut coir. This combination provides good drainage while holding enough moisture. Raised beds also make maintenance much easier. They're less work to weed, easier on your back when harvesting, and they create clear boundaries that keep your garden organized. One important tip: keep your perennial herbs out of your vegetable beds. Herbs like rosemary, oregano, sage, and thyme come back year after year, but your vegetable beds need to be cleared and replanted each season. Give perennials their own dedicated space. Putting your knowledge into action. Now you know the 7 most important vegetable combinations to avoid. You understand why these pairings cause problems, and you've learned about proper care for all your crops. The next step is putting this knowledge to work in your own garden. Before you plant anything this season, sketch out a simple garden map. Mark where each crop will go, making sure you're keeping the problem combinations separated. Think about timing too. Plan your succession planting so that disease-prone crops aren't maturing right when you're starting crops that share the same diseases. Consider starting a garden journal if you haven't already. Write down what you plant, where you plant it, and how each crop performs. Over time, you'll develop an understanding of what works best in your specific garden conditions. Remember, we're here at Backyard Crops to support you through every season. If you found this information helpful, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our upcoming videos. We'll be covering pest control, harvest timing, seed starting, and so much more. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know. Which of these vegetable combinations were you accidentally planting together? Have you noticed problems that now make sense? What vegetables are you most excited to grow this year? Let's build a community of successful gardeners who help each other out. Share your experiences, ask questions, and let's all grow better together. Hit that notification bell so you'll know immediately when we post new content. And share this video with anyone who's struggling with their garden or just getting started. The more gardeners who have this information, the more successful harvests we'll all enjoy. Thanks for watching Backyard Crops. I'm Adam Grove, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, get out there and grow something amazing.